Why doesn't Australia just lease Japanese submarines? On 19 May 2026, the Australian government officially announced the launch of the Life of Type Extension Effort or LOTE for the 6 Collins-class submarines. The $11 billion program aims to extend the Collins-class service life by 10 years. But since Canberra is now spending double the budget for less capability, isn't there a better solution? Japan, for example, has a unique naval doctrine where they decommission world-class submarines after just 20 years of service. So, instead of proceeding with this high-risk endeavor for the Collins, why doesn't Australia just lease some of those outgoing subs? Is it impossible to do? The Collins-class LOTE program represents a massive multi-billion-dollar modernization effort to sustain Australia's submarine capability. The initiative serves 3 primary strategic goals of maintaining a continuous undersea deterrent, safeguarding the Navy's submarine workforce pipeline, and bridging the critical gap before the arrival of the Virginia-class and next-generation SSN AUKUS fleets. The Collins-class modernization effort dates back to the 2009 Defense White Paper, where the government initially planned for comprehensive upgrades, including sonar, sensors, and communication throughout the 2010s. However, 15 years of administrative disruptions driven by a rapid succession of 6 different governments and shifting policy priorities severely stalled progress. As a direct consequence, the scope of the project has transformed from a standard mid-life upgrade into a critical life-of-type extension, now aimed at securing an additional 10 to 12 years of operational service life per boat. Originally, the scope of the LOTE program included equipping the Collins class with torpedo-tube-launched Tomahawk missiles to enhance Australia's long-range strike and deterrent capabilities. However, this idea was dropped in 2024 after being unviable, particularly as this specific missile variant had been out of production for over a decade. Additionally, the integration of Safran's non-penetrating optronic mass was also cancelled, despite the government having already invested $33 million into it. Furthermore, recent reports indicate that the 6 boats won't receive the same level of upgrades, like the need to replace and overhaul propulsion systems, including batteries and engines, reducing the scope of the modernization on a case-by-case basis. Consequently, while the government maintains that the modernization applies fleet-wide, this practice will limit readiness on some boats for the remainder of their service. Despite this reduced capability outcome, Canberra is still committed to investing $11 billion over the next decade. Compounding this problem is the risk surrounding the Virginia-class delivery timeline. The core of the AUKUS optimal pathway relies on the US supplying at least 3 Virginia-class nuclear submarines between 2032 and 2037. But there's a significant risk that deliveries could be delayed or even withheld if the US judges that it has too few boats for its own requirements. Because the aging Collins class is steadily losing its operational edge in the region, any disruption to the Virginia delivery timeline risks stranding Australia without a modern, crewed undersea capability for a decade or more. So, it's in Australia's best interest to prepare now for the future contingency of rapidly buying or leasing conventional submarines abroad. And this is where Japanese submarines enter the chat. Japan has had an extraordinarily stable submarine production since the 80s, building 1 new conventional submarine per year. While submarines are built with a potential service life as much as 40 years, on average, Japanese submarines only serve about 20 years before being put into reserve or converted to training status. With this approach, Japan will always have the latest technology on its subs, ensuring more stability in the industrial base and the budget, and a better reserve fleet. Currently, Japan has 23 submarines in service, consisting of 6 Oyashio, 12 Soyu, and 5 Taige classes. The oldest of the Oyashio class, JS Narushio, was commissioned in 2003, and the youngest of the Taige class, JS Choge, was commissioned in March this year. So, my proposition is, why doesn't Australia just lease the outgoing Japanese submarines? Hear me out. The D-Scope Collins-class LOTE program is estimated to cost a staggering $1.8 billion per boat just to keep the 90s era's technology functioning at baseline capacity. For comparison, a brand new cutting-edge Taige-class submarine costs Tokyo roughly 600 to 700 million to build from scratch. Leasing relatively young Japanese boats with massive operational life left in them will cost Australia a fraction of the LOTE budget while delivering superior capability. Although the brand new Taige-class price tag is tempting, I discourage going this path because it will completely derail Australia's defense focus away from AUKUS. A temporary lease like this, on the other hand, can act as a flexible stopgap that can be scaled up or down depending on when the Virginias actually arrive. From what I see, leasing Japanese submarines serves as a high-reward, low-disruption insurance policy against a collapsing domestic timeline. And for Japan, leasing submarines to Australia is less about immediate financial profit and more about deep geopolitical alignment and defense industrial survival. As I said earlier, Japan builds one submarine per year and retires it after just 20 years. By leasing these outgoing boats to Australia, Japan can turn the decommissioning cost into a lucrative revenue stream. Think of it like monetizing pristine 20-year-old assets that would otherwise sit idle or be scrapped. Japan's greatest strategic anxiety is the potential for a conflict where it stands isolated. It's in Tokyo's national interest that Australia remains a heavily armed and capable of keeping the free and open Indo-Pacific. So, providing Australia with submarines ensures that its key regional ally doesn't lose its primary strategic deterrent in the most dangerous era since World War II. However, I do understand that leasing submarines isn't just about handing over the keys. It involves massive technical, industrial, and political barriers. Australia and Japan use completely different combat systems and weapons in their subs. If they lease Japanese boats, Australian submariners must learn an entirely alien system that won't help them when the Virginia and AUKUS arrive. I'm not even sure if the Japanese subs have an English option in their systems. On top of that, Australia will have to source Japanese proprietary weapons as well. Second, Japan's entire submarine industry is finely tuned to build new submarines. Japan doesn't have excess dry dock space or workforce to perform maintenance on old submarines for export. Australian politicians and defense unions will probably protest over the loss of domestic shipbuilding jobs if the leased submarines have to be sent back to Japan for service. But if Australia tries to service them domestically, Australian shipyard will have to spend a long time learning to maintain Japanese boats, distracting them from the critical work of building the infrastructure for AUKUS. Third, Japan tried to export its Soryus submarine to Australia a decade ago, but due to political maneuvering on the Japanese side and Tokyo ran an inflexible campaign, Australia chose French design instead. A contract Canberra then infamously dumped in favor of AUKUS in 2021. Because of that bruising 2016 experience, I see it as highly unlikely at the moment for both nations to reopen a formal conversation about any submarine procurement. But after the success of the Mogami campaign and the ties between the two nations are closer than ever, I believe it's possible to have that conversation again, especially if we are talking about the outgoing submarines, not the latest one. And given the depth of the request that Australia will potentially be making of Japan, engagement needs to begin now for this option to be a realistic possibility and useful in time. What do you think of a potential Japanese submarine option as an alternative plan between the Collins-class LOTE program and AUKUS? Should Australia explore this alternative, or is this a distraction? Share with us in the comment section below. Thank you for watching everyone. I'll see you in the next one.